everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and my guest today is Dr. Jennifer Marano. Dr. Marano is the co-founder of TrueNorth Health in Santa Rosa. So please welcome Dr. Marano. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time because you know something about a topic that's really, really interesting to my listeners. But before we talk about that, assuming there are people out there that have not yet heard of TrueNorth Health, tell us a little bit about this wonderful place in Santa Rosa that you co-founded with your husband, Dr. Alan Goldhamer, I think about 30 years ago.
Yes, it is. Just about 30 years ago. TrueNorth Health is a health education facility. And we like to educate people about diet and lifestyle. And we specialize in the use of water-only fasting for people when it's appropriate. And when people do these fasts, it helps them make the transition from a typical American diet to a more healthful diet, and it makes it a lot easier for people to do that. We also use it to treat some chronic conditions that are the result of many, many years of poor diet.
Don't you think that most chronic conditions are the result of poor diet, though? I mean, when you really think about it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Most of them are. I mean, there are inherited diseases.
Sure.
There are there's sometimes chronic pain due to traumatic injury in the past, but the vast majority, you're right, are due to diet and lifestyle, lack of exercise, lack of sleep, just living in a modern way that isn't always a healthy way.
Exactly. Now, you said you do this therapeutic water fasting when appropriate. In what cases may it not be appropriate? Because the reason I'm asking that, Dr. Marano, is I was not able to fast, but I still had great benefit from coming to TrueNorth as a non-faster because you offer another, level of care.
Oh, sure. I mean, we can do modified fast, water fast, juice fast. We can just do strictly diet. We've had people stay as long as a year.
Yes.
Just do a healthful diet and still get terrific results.
Yes.
There are, some kidney problems, or if a person is severely underweight, there are situations where we wouldn't use water fasting. But we can use modified diets in order to achieve the same results. It may take a little bit longer getting your results while feeding, but the end point is the same, and we want to do it safely and get the results. We certainly aren't. You don't want to do something that would hurt someone.
Sure. I just wanted to make that point clear because if people were listening and they're either afraid of fasting, I want them to know because I've been to TrueNorth many times, both as a patient and as a guest chef, and you don't have to fast. You can still get wonderful benefit from seeing these doctors and getting the education. And like you say, eating the food, that's really, at the end of the day, that's what's really going to make these people well is learning to eat the food and like the food. Would you not agree? And your food's amazing.
Oh, definitely. Yes, I definitely agree.
Now,
that's
just
really
curious.
important.
Now, I look at you, and I couldn't believe I met you 4 years ago when I was a patient there. And I'm not going to say your age because I always told you never supposed to say a woman's age or weight. But when you told me your age, I honestly thought you were 20 years younger than the age you told me. Do you think the fact that you've followed such a healthy lifestyle has anything to do with how amazing you look? Or is it just genetic?
Well, first of all, thank you. But,
You're welcome.
I really do feel that my physical condition has everything to do with my diet and lifestyle. In the 33 or 34 years since I met Dr. Goldhamer, I really do. I look at other people in my family. I look at people who've been friends for a long time. I look at the people in my walking group and who I've known for close to 15 years now, and I really do think that a lot of the difference has to do with the diet and the exercise, the whole lifestyle.
So before you met Dr. Goldhamer, were you following a different diet than the one you follow and teach today to your patients?
Oh, yes. Even though I was a biology and chemistry major in college, we never studied diet. Nutrition just wasn't wasn't something that I learned about, but I did happen on a few books early on. The first of them being the Pritikin books.
Yes.
And
I was just watching
I
an
looked
interview.
at those.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Pritikin book really made me start thinking about what I'm eating, and then the other was the aerobics books by Kenneth Cooper, and I realized that I grew up in a time when the women, the girls in high school didn't really have a serious exercise program. The boys did sports. The girls were in a gymnasium with almost 100 people, and if whatever sport we did, like playing basketball, if you got to shoot the basketball twice in the 45-minute period, that was a lot.
Right.
So I wasn't in the habit of exercising, and I wasn't in the habit of paying attention to what I was eating. And those two books were the first two things that really brought this to my attention. And so by the time I met Dr. Goldhamer, I had started to change my diet, and I certainly had incorporated exercise. But I was not even vegetarian, let alone vegan.
Wow. Interesting. So how did he influence you? Because I've got to say, Dr. Goldhamer really is one of my heroes, and he's one of the most influential people in my life. And what I think is so neat about him is I can't remember my literature very well from high school. I can't remember if it was Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn, but in one of those books, there's a chapter where he was punished and he had to whitewash this fence as a punishment. So instead,
yes.
Yeah. So instead, what he made it do is he sounded like it was really fun and got all his friends to do his work. And for me, Dr. Goldhamer, he takes this diet, which other people may seem extreme, but he makes it just like he's so smart and he's so convincing that it's just like, why wouldn't you do what he says, especially if you want the results, And when I met him, I'm almost 50 pounds heavier than I was now. And I wasn't actually going to TrueNorth for losing weight. I was going for another reason. But he made it so enrolling, and it made it seem so possible that if I did what he said, I could get the results. And I actually did. But I want to thank you, Dr. Marano, because there was something you said in one of your regular lectures at TrueNorth in January of 2011 that forever changed the way I ate and the way I teach people now. And you were the first person in the plant-based movement. And what you said is, as you know, the food that you serve at TrueNorth is the most health-promoting food on the planet. It's all whole food, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, small amounts of nuts and seeds for certain people, and no sugar, oil, and salt. You can't get any cleaner or any healthier. And the first time I met you, your lecture was a little bit about weight loss, and you said to the group, you said, I can't eat all this food and be slim. And there's a lot of people in our plant-based movement, and I don't think they mean to do this on purpose, but a lot of them are male. A lot of them have never been overweight, have never had issues like I had with anorexia, bulimia, food addiction, emotional eating. And there seems to be an idea out there that as long as it's whole food, plant-based, and no oil, you can eat all you want. And you were the first person that said, no, that's not true. And I remember when I met you, to me, you looked perfect. You had said you wanted to lose about 10 pounds, and you ended up doing that in a way that we're going to talk about today. But you were the first person that said, no, you just can't eat all the avocado you want. You can't just eat all the oats you want. And I thank you so much, because finally somebody who was a doctor and a leader in the plant-based movement finally said to us, there are probably people that can, like my husband, like Doug Lyle, but you explained that if you're a female, that's not us. And you helped me so much because you were the first person that said it.
Well, I'm really glad that made an impact.
It did.
But it took me a while to kind of come to grips with that myself.
Yeah, and so it's amazing to me. And then, like I said, when I saw you, you looked fine to me. But you're a petite woman. You're not tall, and so I can understand that when you're even a few pounds heavier than you want to be when you're petite, like my sister, you wanted to do something about it, and you did. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today, because it's something that I learned from you, and then I teach a lot of my students, especially those that are very close to their ideal weight. It's not necessarily for people that are very overweight, which most Americans are, but you did something called intermittent fasting. And I'd love for you to tell us what that is.
Okay, intermittent fasting. It's really a complex of things, but mainly what it is allowing your body some time when it's not eating. in our typical society, people just eat all the time. They eat when they wake up. They have a mid-morning snack. They eat at lunch. They have an afternoon snack. They eat dinner. They have an evening snack. They have a pre-bedtime snack. There's never a time when they're not eating.
Right.
Their bodies are constantly processing this food that we put in, and it takes the body, at least 8 to 12 hours, depending on the person, to clear that out.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, we don't normally sleep 12 hours. So by the time someone wakes up in the morning, they haven't even cleared out the day before's food, and they start eating again. And so consequently, our body never goes into that mode where it has to use up the leftovers from all the previous weeks and months,
Mm-hmm.
and it just keeps piling on more. And there are a lot of physiological reasons that happens, which I probably shouldn't go into too much, but I mean, one of them is just insulin level.
Mm-hmm.
When you eat all the time, your body has to keep pumping out insulin in order to deal with the breakdown products of the food. And if your insulin is always on the high side, even if it's not dangerous, such as like in diabetes, but if you always have a fairly high level of insulin, insulin promotes fat storage, which
Sure.
means it takes the fat from your blood and puts it into fat cells.
Mm-hmm.
And if you never give your body a chance to actually be hungry, then there's never a time when your body has to take fat out of the fat cells and use it to exist, to keep on living. So what intermittent fasting is different eating strategies where you give your body some time to use your stores. And in order to use your fat storage, your body has to have the proper enzymes to do that, to break down fat and turn it into energy that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
So normally, not normally, but in our ancestral past, when people were hunters and gatherers, this wasn't a problem because there were always times when people were hungry.
Right. They
Because
weren't
get enough
eating
food.
3 meals. They weren't eating 3 meals a day and snacks. And that's the other thing I want our listeners to know, that's something we invented, this 3 meal a day thing. That's not like in history.
Oh no, it didn't. No, that didn't used to happen.
Right.
For one thing, there wasn't all that food, and
Uh-huh.
for another, people didn't have time. They had to work. They had to go
Right.
out and grow the crops and hunt the animals or gather the nuts and seeds, and they had a lot of work to do. They didn't
Sure.
have time to sit around snacking.
Right. And they weren't overweight.
I
As a consequence, they were not overweight, our ancestors.
No, not unless they were extremely wealthy.
Right.
They didn't get a chance to get overweight. All of this kind of it just keeps bringing me back to this whole motivational triad idea that we talk about at TrueNorth. We talk about the pleasure trap and
Right.
how
It's a great book, by the way.
that's
Yeah, let's tell our listeners about the book because it's one of my favorite books of all time, co-written by your husband, Dr. Alan Goldhamer, and Dr. Doug Lyle, and it is a must-read. It's just such a brilliant book.
right, and it's in some ways it's so simple, but this motivational triad that everybody is trying to avoid pain.
Yep.
Of course, that makes sense.
Sure.
They seek pleasure.
Sure.
Makes sense. And they want to do it in a way that conserves the most energy possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were a cave person, this makes sense. You avoid pain, so you avoid trying to get to be eaten by wild animals or beat up by somebody. You're avoiding pain. You're seeking pleasure, which is mostly food and sex in that time. And you need to try to do it as efficiently as possible because when you're already having to expend a huge amount of energy all day long, if you are sloppy about it and like walk twice as far as you need to, or lift twice as much weight as you have to, or whatever, you don't compete well against people who are doing things more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
But when you translate that into modern life, you seek pleasure, so you like to eat,
Sure.
And the food is there. It's all around you. And so you keep eating it because it feels good to eat. And and
Yep.
you don't exercise because, it's not that comfortable.
Yeah, it's also energy conservation. What if I have to get, chase a deer later? I can't exercise now and use up.
Yeah, so you don't do anything that you really have to, and so you're avoiding your pain. You're trying to conserve energy. You're seeking pleasure, but it backfires because all of these things are so plentiful that your own good instincts are backfiring and causing you a problem. So this whole intermittent fasting thing is where you impose some discipline on yourself to give your body a break.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get too extreme about it, like if you tell somebody, "Oh, just go for a week without eating," well, that's something you need to do under supervision.
Sure.
It's not something you would do on your own. So the problem is to figure out a way to do it without causing yourself actual pain. Discomfort is different.
Right.
Some people really mix up.
It's not that hard. I tried it myself just because I don't like to recommend. And it's funny because I used to be a respiratory therapist, and we had to do things to patients like suction them and do blood gases. And I wouldn't do anything to a patient that I hadn't had done on myself because I really am an empathetic person.
Oh.
And by the way, I did not like being suctioned or having my blood gas drawn. But so I tried it. Not that I need to lose weight. And it really isn't that hard. And we've used it on some of the people that are my clients that have also been in TrueNorth just to get those last 10 pounds off just by narrowing the feeding window. And it's not that extreme because really at the end of the day, it's like missing breakfast. That's what we're telling people to do. And there's this precept that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And people have had that drummed into their head. But I think it was you that taught me that research was done by the cereal industry. Talk about that. Talk about why breakfast is not really the most important meal of the day.
They have done several studies in the past couple of years. And what they find is that it doesn't make any difference in terms of health, in terms of weight loss, whether you have breakfast or don't have breakfast. Some people like to eat breakfast.
Sure.
Fine. Some people don't like to eat breakfast. It doesn't hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not the most important meal of the day. It's not the most important meal of the day if you're eating, it has to be eaten at a certain time.
Yeah.
If you postpone your first meal of the day until midday, it's not a big deal and it won't hurt you. And it's a lot of propaganda. And I think you're right by the cereal industry. There was a study that was done way back with school children.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found is that the kids who came to school without breakfast didn't do as well as the children who came to school who had eaten breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
But what they didn't correct for is the fact that the kids who came to school without breakfast came from very poor families where they really weren't getting enough to eat. And so it wasn't just a matter of them not having breakfast.
They just didn't have
enough dinner.
Yeah, interesting.
They're hungry and they're irritable, and they probably had families where education wasn't the highest priority. And the kids who came to school who had breakfast were probably from families who were very interested in school, very interested in their children, were trying to do everything so as they would succeed. It wasn't the breakfast per se that really made the difference. It was the whole lifestyle of these different children. And they never really did any more experiments after that. They just pronounced that breakfast was the most important meal.
Yeah.
And that really wasn't warranted based on real life. That just wasn't enough information to make a sweeping statement like breakfast is the most important meal.
And what they were telling them to eat wasn't what you or I would consider a healthy breakfast, which would be a boxed sugary cereal with cow pus on it.
Sure.
So right, it's interesting because again, I think one of the things I also learned at TrueNorth, because I've been there so many times, even though I personally have never fasted, when I've worked in the kitchen, I've delivered food to people as they were breaking the fast, and many people fast for up to 42 days. That's 6 weeks. And so my feeling is if there are people that aren't even overweight that can go 6 weeks without eating, I can skip breakfast once in a while. I'm not going to drop dead. And I noticed because it's funny because my husband is just naturally slender. He's 6 feet, 140 pounds. Him and Doug Lyle could probably wear each other's clothes. He wakes up in the morning and he's starving. And it's like if he has to have a blood test or something, he's like suffering. But my whole life, I've never woken up hungry. And my feeling is that we shouldn't eat if we're not hungry. I mean, that's our body telling us that something. Don't you think we should kind of listen a little bit?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, to force yourself to eat when you're not hungry, it's counterproductive.
Yeah,
your body does have a hunger mechanism to tell you when it wants food, and so
And I think sometimes whether a person eats breakfast or not, what can be equally as important is what they're eating. And if you eat a breakfast like at True North, where we're served a 24-hour salad bar, where we're getting steamed vegetables, where we're getting some oats, that's way different than what a lot of people are eating for breakfast now, which are some kind of sugary coffee drink or a donut. I always think about Jack LaLanne, who said you wouldn't wake your dog up and give him a cup of coffee, a cigarette, and a donut. But how many Americans are doing that to themselves?
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Jack LaLanne it was really interesting. He had so many things to say that really ring true over all the decades that he's.
Oh, he was really one of my
known to.
Yeah, he used to say the only good part of the donut is the hole, and so that was
he had a lot of things like that.
I so wish I would have been able to meet him, and even Pritikin, who you mentioned was influential in your transition. I don't remember exactly what time frame it was that Pritikin was around. I remember that when I lived where I live now in Sherman Oaks, I believe it was the 80s. He had these Pritikin centers, and I wish I had the interest as I do now. But I was just listening to an interview with Nathan Pritikin today, and it had to be done at least 20, if not 30 years ago. And what he was saying back then, it's exactly like what you guys teach at True North. There's very little difference. And people were asking him, well, what about coffee and alcohol? And this was even before the research we have now that drinking even a little bit of alcohol every week increases your risk of breast cancer. He didn't even know back then. He was saying, well, he was just saying it's not good. It's not good. And those things at True North are not recommended either, coffee and alcohol as part of a healthy diet. So you guys are a little bit before your time. So where did you learn about intermittent fasting, and do you practice it today, and how long have you been doing it, and how does it look in your life if you do it?
Okay. I became aware of it probably 2 to 3 years ago. I started hearing. Well, it must have been 2012. Someone, and I don't even remember who now, forwarded me a link to a BBC TV show put on by Dr. Michael Mosley, and this was summer of 2012. And I, because fasting was in the title, and because I've worked with fasting, I clicked on it, and it was fascinating. I had not. When we do fasting, we usually do extended periods of fasting. And during that, your body goes through different changes. And it sort of seemed like just doing short periods of fasting wouldn't be effective. But when I looked at this video and saw the changes that happened in Dr. Mosley himself over a period of 3 months, and in the particular type of, what he did is he went through all the research, and he visited different researchers and talked about all the different forms of intermittent fasting, from really severe calorie restriction, where people try to restrict their calories 30 to 40% of what a normal person would eat every day.
That would be hard.
Which is really draconian, and it has its drawbacks, because people who do that can become very weak. They become very skinny. It can, if it started at a young age, it can result in stunting. And then he went on to people who did things like alternate day fasting, where one day they would eat normally, the next day they would eat a very small amount, anywhere from 500 to 650 calories for the day. And then, he experimented with that, and he found what he didn't like about that was that he could never predict if someone said, "Hey, do you want to do such and such next Saturday?" Well, he'd have to look at his calendar and count to see if that was one of the every other days when he could eat. And then he talked to some other people who were actually doing some experiments with women who were at grave risk for breast cancer, who were doing a 5-2 plan, where 5 days a week they ate normally, and the other 2 days they really restricted their calories down to 500 calories a day. And he saw that where they compared women who did that to women who restricted themselves every day to 1,500 calories a day. And he showed, the differences in their results in terms of weight loss and the origin of the tissues that are lost. I found that very interesting, that the people who did the intermittent fasting lost between 85 and 100% of their weight as fat, whereas the people who restricted their calories every day lost 75% fat and 25% muscle.
That's better. Because
you don't want to lose muscle. That's
we want.
You really don't. You want to keep your muscle. You want to lose fat.
The fat, sure.
Yes. So so that was very interesting. He even tried in this video a 4-day fast and showed the results from that. Anyway, that video really just opened my eyes about this intermittent fasting. And so then I began searching the internet, and all sorts of things were being written about it, were being studied about it. There are just all kinds of studies. And that culminated actually just a few weeks ago in an article that was published in, it's called Cell, a journal called Cell, Cell Metabolism Review. And this was by Dr. Walter Longo.
Oh, I know him. I mean, from USC. I've corresponded with him a few times.
Yes, he's been to the center. He's talked to Dr. Goldhamer, and he started with doing intermittent fasting studies on animals, and he has moved on to where he's doing some human trials, the results of which have not been published yet, which will be in the next few years. This is really exciting time for fasting, because all these studies are going on. I mean, animal studies have happened for many, many years, but the studies on humans are just getting started. But anyway, he wrote very, very interesting, multi-page, it must be 10, 12 pages of all the physiological mechanisms and why fasting works, and what happens in your body when you fast. That I had a friend who was saying, "Well, there's no justification for all of this." I said, "Here, do you want to see the justification?" And I gave her this article by Dr. Longo.
The
next day, she gave it back. She said, "I couldn't get past the first page.
Oh, boy.
I couldn't understand it."
Well, you mentioned animals. When you think about it, Dr. Marano, except for our domesticated dogs and domesticated cats, there's no overweight animals in nature, and they don't eat every day. They certainly don't eat 3 meals a day, and they don't eat every day. So they're sort of doing intermittent fasting whether they want to or not.
Yes, they are. They are.
Yeah.
It's just hard to convince people when you mention not having a meal. You get this look of horror from people. That's not healthy. That's not safe. But it's
so funny.
But what it is, it's not comfortable.
Yeah.
And in so much of our modern, I've been thinking about this the last couple of days. We have gotten really addicted to comfort.
Yes. Oh, I agree.
Don't like to step outside our comfort zone.
I agree. I've become a little bit of a princess. I live in Southern California, and it rained yesterday for like an hour, and it was like, oh, you're kidding. I actually have to walk in the rain. It's like, what am I going to melt? But you're right. I think our modern society has made so many conveniences that when we have to rough it, it's like, oh boy, it's like, you're right. I think we are. We're addicted to the comfort.
I even such simple things as temperature.
We
have thermostats in our houses. We want the temperature in a really narrow range that makes us happy.
That is so funny because I interviewed one of the people that came to True North, Ray Cronice, who did the NASA scientist who did some research with temperature and suggested that we turn it down at night. And I'm like one of these people that jacks the heat up to 80, sleeps on a heated waterbed. And you're right. I think this motivational triad of seeking pleasure, I think we've taken it a bit too far in our society because we're seeking it all the time because pleasure is so pleasurable. But that's actually why it's probably why we're in trouble. Yeah. This intermittent fasting, because I remember the documentary by Mosley that you talked about. I actually watched it on YouTube. And if I remember correctly, the people in England that were doing it, they were not eating the kind of diet that you and I eat, a health promoting diet. They were just eating anything, the standard American diet, and they were still getting some results. So I'm thinking if the people that you and I know that are already eating pretty healthy, health promoting diet do this with the diet we're on, I think the results could be even greater or just as good for sure.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yes. When he talked about some of the stuff he was eating after he broke his fast, I mean, it made me cringe.
Yeah.
But he did fine. He lists his pre and post results in terms of his blood values. Unbelievable changes.
That's fantastic.
Just incredible. 3 months of 2 days a week fasting and then eating crap the rest of the time, he lost 19 pounds.
That's incredible.
And it was all fat.
That is absolutely incredible. So there are certain days, like for instance, I go spin 3 days a week, and when I spin, I'm just starving, and so I bring my vegetables with me, and I eat when I get off the bike. But a couple days a week, I do a very slow yoga class. Well, the yoga class is until 11. It goes from 11 to 12:30, and I can't eat before I exercise. Even yoga, even a banana, it just doesn't sit right with me. And so on those days, I'm doing intermittent fasting without really knowing that's what I was doing because my lunch isn't till 1 o'clock. And because my dinner's at 6, I've narrowed the feeding window. And so, if I don't eat, presumably if I stop eating, the night before at 6 or 7 and don't eat again, that's like 16 hours. So would you consider that a form of intermittent fasting?
That is a form of intermittent fasting.
Yeah. And I'm not suffering because, I know that I'm going to eat right after, yoga. And
that's right.
And so many people, and, I interviewed your husband, Dr. Goldhamer, twice. And this comes up a lot is that so many people, especially those that complain that they can't lose weight, they're not just eating the 3 meals a day with snacks, but they eat into the night. And he was saying that that's the worst eating you can do because you're not going to run a marathon at night and those calories always get stored as fat. So I think if people didn't want to do intermittent fasting, if we could articulate that if they could just stop eating after dinner, that would be a tremendous benefit.
It would be a tremendous benefit.
Yes.
It would, because then they wouldn't be just sending it straight into the storage bins.
Right.
Which is what people are doing.
If they could visually see that, that would be, if they could just see that what they're going in their mouth is going in their ass right away, especially those after dinner, treats. Right. And that seems when, that I know so many people that seems to be when they get their most calories from after dinner to bedtime. It's like there's like one munch session.
One of the things that is really important there, even for people who are normal weight, even for people who aren't in danger of putting on extra pounds by doing that, some of the other things that happen during the fasting period are very, very important to long-term health. And so I think it's important to talk about some of those.
Sure, please do.
One of the things that happens when you're fasting, even short-term fast, is this hormone called a brain-derived neurotropic hormone increases. The levels of it increase. And what it does is it stimulates brain stem cells to turn into brain neurons, particularly in the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain that's really important for learning and memory. And so what they find is that if you are just eating all the time and not exercising, you don't produce much of this BNF, brain-derived neurotropic hormone. Anyway, you don't produce much of it, and so your brain can slowly deteriorate. They did some interesting studies with mice that had been, I hate talking about animal studies because it's so cruel to the animals, but it
Me
really
too.
does explain
But
a
that's
lot of things
right.
that happen. So they have these mice, this particular strain of mice, that develop Alzheimer's disease, or the mouse equivalent of Alzheimer's disease, at a very early age. Mice usually live about 2 years.
Wow.
These mice, if you feed them this normal food, they develop Alzheimer's symptoms at 12 months.
Wow.
So it's really early. It's the equivalent of people developing it, say, at 50 years of age, 45 even.
Mm-hmm.
If they put these animals on a really bad diet, if they feed them junk food, they develop Alzheimer's symptoms between 4 and 6 months.
Jeez.
But if they feed them their normal lab rat chow, and put them on alternate day fasting, so every other day they don't eat,
Mm-hmm.
they don't develop Alzheimer's until they're 20 months old, which is like the equivalent for a human of being 90.
So it delays the onset.
It delays the onset, and the way that it does this is that it increases the production of this brain-derived neurotrophic hormone that stimulates brain cell growth. If you look at the mice that haven't been doing that, their hippocampus has shrunken and is really small. But if you look at the other mice, the ones that have been fasted periodically, their hippocampus is just like in a young mouse.
Mm.
And they've been doing some modified, experiments with people, because we can now use MRIs to see the size of the hippocampus in humans.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do this intermittent fasting in elderly humans, it seems like their hippocampus grows bigger rather than smaller.
This is amazing.
And
this is good news, because so much of our population now is suffering with this disease. So many people have loved ones in their family that are either getting this disease or already have it.
yes, yeah, it's true.
That
And
is amazing.
another thing is this the whole insulin problem.
Yes, you mentioned that earlier about that. I'd love for you to talk more about this, because does all eating stimulate the production of insulin, or just eating the wrong foods? Because you said that insulin is responsible for what drives fat into the cells.
Right.
So,
but besides insulin itself, there's this insulin-like growth factor,
mm-hmm.
IGF-1 is what it's called. IGF-1 it stimulates growth. And if you eat a lot of animal protein, you tend to have really high levels of IGF-1.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're a child, you need high levels of this, because you are promoting growth. You're in the growth stage. But once you become an adult, you still need some, but you don't need really, really high levels. There is they have a range of what's normal. People who eat a high meat and high sugar and high fat diet,
which is pretty much
everybody
in the United States, except for you and me and the
yes,
TrueNorth or Dr. McDougall.
That's right. Whereas people who eat a vegan diet have a much lower IGF-1 level. And what they're finding is that this IGF-1, by stimulating growth, also stimulates cancer.
Wow.
Because cancer, one of the things about cancer cells is that they divide rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have high IGF-1 levels, and you should happen to get some mutations or whatever damage that happens to your cells that turns it into a possible cancer cell, you've got this possible cancer cell, and then you've got something stimulating it to divide. And so it can make cancers progress more rapidly. It can make them more deadly. To keep this level low, there are different things that you can do. One is you can do intermittent fasting or regular fasting. Regular fasting, boy, after 3 or 4 days of regular fasting, those IGF-1 levels really go down. But just eating a vegan diet keeps it down in a reasonable level. And the other thing is to really cut the animal protein.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not vegan, if you keep the amount of animal protein low, you have a much lower level of IGF-1. So it's so there are all these chemical things going on in your body that promote health way into the future, that can be impacted by doing intermittent fasting, either a narrow window where
Mm-hmm.
you're eating 6 or 8 hours out of the day and fasting the rest of the time, or throwing in a day or two a week of modified eating where you just eat a 500 to 600 calories that day, and then eat normally the other 5 days of the week. Or for if you have a lot of weight to lose, if you just do alternate day fasting with a real small meal one day, what they find is really interesting. They thought at first that people would just binge the next day
Mm-hmm.
and eat, like 200% of what they would normally eat. But they don't. They tend to eat about 110% of what they would normally eat.
So
So they make up for some of it.
Do you think that
It's not too bad,
Yeah. Do you think when people are doing this narrow feeding window, let's say just eating like 6 hours a day, whether they eat breakfast and lunch and then skip dinner? I have some friends that are doing it that way. They're senior citizens and turn in early, or if they're doing lunch and dinner. Do you think people, because they know they can only eat for 6 hours, are overeating or eating more during that time frame?
They can.
Mm-hmm.
They can. But, you get full if you're
Yeah.
eating for 6 or 8 hours. You eat a certain amount and then you really don't want it anymore. I think you can get around it, and you can particularly get around it if you eat the wrong foods. Just like eating whole natural foods, I can get around it. I just eat more rice, or I eat more whatever,
I know we always
can
find
get
a
fat
way.
on anything.
We can always find a way to push the envelope, can't we?
Yes, you can. So you have to kind of use common sense when you're doing this.
Sure.
It's not like, I'm doing this so I can eat whatever I want.
Right, exactly. It's interesting you were talking about the protein and how just lowering the levels of protein, even if somebody doesn't want to be plant-based, will help, because so many Americans are getting the opposite message, that we need more protein and better protein, and we have these paleo diets and all these high protein diets, which are actually probably among the most disease-promoting diets that are out there, maybe even worse than the diet in some ways.
Yeah, the really high protein diets are bad, and
so
the jury's still out on the high fat, but
oh boy,
if it's
so why is it so much harder for us women to lose weight? It doesn't seem very fair to me.
No, it's not, but it's estrogen.
Oh.
Our bodies are designed to have children, and if you're going to be pregnant and nursing and whatever, you need to be able to hold on to your calories.
Sure, but
so it doesn't matter if we don't choose to have children, or if we're too old to have children, or whatever.
It's not
the hormones are still there.
Fair. I just, that always bothered me. It just doesn't seem fair, So
not fair.
You were mentioning earlier that sleep is important. How important is sleep? Why is it important, and how does it affect our ability to lose weight?
Well, there have been some really interesting studies done lately about sleep, and this one Time magazine a few months ago had a really interesting article. What they found is that during sleep, the cells in the brain squeeze down. They become really small, and they squeeze out a bunch of their fluid, and then it acts like a washing machine and just whooshes all that fluid with any toxins that are in the cells out, and out into the cerebrospinal fluid, and then into the bloodstream, and it's like washing your brain out every night. And if you don't sleep enough, you don't actually get this happening, and so you have toxins building up in the brain. And so that's one of the reasons sleep is so important.
Yeah. And so many people.
In terms of how it. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so many people don't sleep long enough or don't sleep adequate enough. They go to bed with their, iPhones, and they've got all these electronic devices in their bedroom, and they really don't get quality sleep.
Oh, correct. Yes, that's really one of the banes of our existence.
Yeah, we got rid of the TV in our bedroom. I mean, once we heard about this, there's no TV in the bedroom anymore.
Yes, right. Yeah, I like to, if I'm going to watch TV at all, I like to be finished with it by 9 o'clock, and then I like to take a warm bath and just relax. If I read, I try to not read on a electronic screen. I'll just read a book, a real
Mm-hmm.
book, and just not expose my eyes to all that blue light from
Sure.
electronic screens, and try to get to sleep at a decent hour.
Right, because our
Sleep.
ancestors didn't have this artificial light. They had to go to bed when it was dark. They didn't have a
That's right.
choice, so they weren't
That's
watching
right.
TV and snacking all night. You talked about reading. You are such an avid reader, and every book you've ever recommended to me has been just a great book. So I'm just curious, what are you told me about Catching Fire, and that was a great book. What are you reading now?
Oh, actually, right now I'm reading a book about exercise.
Oh yeah, let's talk
It's
about exercise because one of the things you're a very fit person. I know that you and tell people what you do, but you also talked about the high intensity interval training that can kind of complement the intermittent fasting. So why don't you tell us what you do
yeah.
and what that is?
Okay. Well, exercise actually uses some of the same mechanisms as fasting. It's really very complementary. In fact, I'm contemplating writing an article about the synergistic combination of high intensity interval training and intermittent fasting.
And I hope you
Um,
will. Because your article that was
um,
in the NHA magazine about intermittent fasting, and when we send this out, we can provide a link to it. It's a fabulous article, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it. So tell us about the exercise, because a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there are people that eat healthfully, but that still haven't been bitten by that exercise bug. So tell us, about
right.
because that seems it almost seems harder to get people to exercise than it does to get them to eat a salad. you know.
Yeah. Well, it's again, this comfort zone. They don't want to push outside that comfort zone, and they're fighting their instinct to be to conserve energy. So it takes a bit of a push, but if people can push a bit beyond it, you start getting an actual pleasure from the exercise, and
Yes, yes.
that's the trick is to get yourself to do it in the first place. And
Yeah.
and for people who don't like it, there are all kinds of interesting devices. I exercise plenty, but I decided I had to have one of these activity and sleep trackers. So I got
Mm.
a Fitbit
Oh, nice.
because Costco had a big sale on it,
Oh, great.
and and it counts your steps and it
Neat.
translates it into miles and it
Sure.
translates it into how many calories you've burned. And it also, if you keep it on at night, tells you how many hours you're asleep, how many times you wake up at night,
Ooh.
that sort of thing. So it really gives you a lot of information about your body. Um, and you can interface it on a computer. I just found out that my sister has one too. All right, so now I'm her friend on Fitbit,
It's
and
like being
I
a
see how
friend.
many
That's so funny. It's like friends
I
on
can see how many steps she does in a day. Well, she's a chiropractor and she's on her feet all day long. I don't do that anymore. I do all the paperwork and everything. And so I'm looking at her steps, and boy, she takes a lot more steps than I do.
Facebook.
So
No
it's getting me up
no
out of
competition.
my chair.
That's great.
But anyway, I do yoga 3 days a week.
Mhm.
I do step aerobic class 3 days a week. I do a weight training class, or actually one class and one on my own of weight training. I do my high intensity interval training, which is a real interesting kind of workout because it's fast. It's only 20 to, I sometimes stretch it to 30 minutes, but really it's a 20-minute workout. You can do it anywhere, but I do it on an exercise bike because I can do that anytime. I don't have a good track to run on. But what you do is you warm up for a few minutes. I do about 5 minutes warm up, and then I go all out as fast as I can pedal that thing, and I also move up the resistance a bit for 20 to 30 seconds, depending on how active I'm feeling that day. And then I ease back and I just pedal more slowly for about 90 seconds, and then I'll do it again, all out, and I do about five to six repetitions of that. I'd like to eventually get to 8. I don't know why, it just appeals to me. But so you're only really doing by the end of it, if you do it, say 6 times, you're only really doing 3 minutes of really intense exercise, and the rest of it's just kind of pedaling along and recovering. And you do this twice a week, and the results from it are way beyond what you would expect compared to things like going out and running for an hour. There have been all kinds of studies. This is what I've been reading about in this book by Gretchen Reynolds. She's a columnist for the New York Times. She puts out an article every Wednesday about different aspects of fitness and health in general. She's quite a good writer. But this book is specifically about exercise.
And what's it called again? What's the name of the book?
It's called The First 20 Minutes.
Interesting.
And she talks about how that first 20 minutes is the real important thing in your exercise regime. And she talks about different kinds of exercise and how they're important. But and Michael Mosley wrote a book called Fast Exercise. After he did his fast diet book, he did another one of these BBC TV programs on high-intensity interval training. And he wrote a book about it that talks about just a really easy way to do it. And even people who hate exercise can get talked into doing this because it takes so little time.
Right.
Sounds like he has them just do 3 intervals. And he does 3 intervals, 20 seconds hard, as hard as you can go, and then you about a minute and a half or so of rest between, and that's it. And he shows again his results before and after, and how much it impacts his fitness. And it really is an easy way to get people to start exercising. And after that, once you really start liking it,
that's true, because once
you really want to do other stuff.
Exactly. And then once you see what it does for you, and it makes you feel better and improves your self-esteem, and and you get to eat a little bit more. So I mean, it's one of those things I didn't do until I was in my 50s, but now I understand that without it, one of the things I learned after I lost this 50 pounds is that without that exercise isn't necessarily as important for weight loss, but it's really very important to prevent weight gain. And so once I heard that, it was like, okay, I'm in, because I don't want this back. So you have children and you have grandchildren, and we have a lot of people that listen to Healthy Living that have the problem of trying to get their spouse or their children to eat healthy. Now, it doesn't seem like that was a problem for you, but how were you able to manage raising your kids healthy in an unhealthy world? Any advice you can give to parents?
Well, the unfortunate thing is, of my 2 children, one of them is like the perfect poster child for healthy living.
I bet you're talking about Gar. I bet you're talking about Gar. He's adorable. I love him.
Oh yes.
He
started this way. He doesn't know anything else.
Sure.
Here's a kid who's never tasted ice cream.
Oh boy.
He would get taunted by his cousins. I can eat ice cream and you can't. He says so. But he's never had ice cream. He doesn't. It doesn't seem like a hardship to him.
Yeah.
And when people get on me about it, how can you deny him ice cream? I said, well, how do you deny your kids heroin? Doesn't heroin make people feel good? And then they get all huffy about it.
You're hilarious.
But it's a lot harder to make kids change once you let them get exposed to the bad things. Because they're addictive. All this high sugar, high fat,
dairy,
high salt
foods
are addictive.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard. I have trouble with my own grandchildren because my daughter came along before I ever got started with any of this.
Sure.
And so, once I made the change, she wasn't willing to.
Wow.
I know she'll exercise, just as much as you want, she'll exercise, but she refuses to give up the things that she's addicted to.
Right. So note to parents, make the change before you have the kids, because then it's going to be a lot easier.
Oh boy. Yeah. That's the only other thing is that parents can give a good example.
Right, exactly.
I remember having patients who, would do all the things they had to for one kid because the kid had allergies or whatever, and then they let the other kids eat all this crap. And
Yeah.
all it did was drive the first kid crazy. But if
Oh.
parents eat the in a healthful way,
Hmm.
and that's all there is in the house, then that's what they
Yeah.
do. And parents have to get over this. Oh, he'll starve. I have to give
Oh.
him, Twinkies, or he's going to starve to death. He's not going to starve to death.
Right, exactly. Kids will not start. I love what your husband says, that good health is the result of healthful living. You shared a story with me once, and if I say it incorrectly, please correct me. But something to the effect of when Gar was, I don't know how old, you were at some kind of function and there were cupcakes, and I guess he brought a
Oh,
cupcake
right.
over to you and said, "Mom, can I have this?" And your answer was, I should have you tell a story, but it was something like where you said to him, you said, "Well, yeah, you could have it, but if you have it, these would be the consequences." And you talked to him like as if he was adult, like saying, if you eat this, you're going to really like it. It's going to be really good. You're going to be addicted to it. And then you said he like just put the cupcake away.
Yeah, he listened to me. He said okay. He turned around, he left, and then I saw him 2 minutes later. He had no cupcake in his hand. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh, all right, he ate it already. And I said,
Yeah.
oh, so what did you think? He said, oh, I decided I didn't want to get into all that,
Oh,
so
what
I
a
put it
smart
back.
kid. What a smart kid. He's just amazing. And he's only 30 and he looks 15. So obviously there's something to be said about this way of eating.
Yeah.
What I also like about you, because I find, Dr. Marano, I find you so much more relatable, mainly maybe because you are a female and that you understand the difficulties some of us women have with this. I make that really delicious raw granola that I sometimes give your husband.
Oh God.
I love the fact that you call it crack and won't let it in your house, because that's exactly how I feel about it. And I'm the one that's making it. And I was told a long time ago by a recovering alcoholic that you should never get high on your own supply. And I just think it's great because it just shows that you're human. And one of the things we teach in our ultimate weight loss program is that if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And I love that you said, look, no, we're not bringing that stuff in the house. And yet it was a whole natural food. It just was one of these hyper
Right.
creations with a lot of dates and a lot of nuts. So I really admire you for that. And I just love that you're always learning. There's a saying that says that we don't stop learning because we grow old. We grow old because we stop learning. And you just seem to, every time I meet you, just know more that you can share. And it's I wish you were, regularly lecturing more at True North, not just at the holidays, because I really enjoy learning the kind of things that you have to talk about. So please write more articles, at least.
Okay.
Uh,
Once I can retire from doing this, all the book work that I've been doing, I think I will spend more time
yeah.
writing and speaking at the center.
Just out of
Because
curiosity,
I do enjoy it.
yeah, no, you're really good, and I just out of curiosity, because you appear very young and very fit and healthful. Do you personally fast?
Yes, I fast every year. I do a short fast, 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do it once a year, usually early spring.
Mm-hmm.
I try to do it around the time of Lent,
Oh.
because it seems like that's a time, like in our prehistory. The end of the winter, it's just becoming spring, but all the new foods that grow aren't available yet, and it's probably the time of year that humans most likely suffered from hunger. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's a good way. It's like spring cleaning also, just
Sure.
to get ready for the new season. And so I fast once a year for 5 days, and then I do intermittent fasting. Well, I do the narrow window,
Mm-hmm.
almost all the time.
Yeah.
I typically anywhere from 8 to 6 hours. Sometimes depending on what I have to do, I may start eating at 10 or I may start eating at 12, and I never eat after 6.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
then,
advice. We had Dr. Clapper on the show, who is one of the medical doctors at True North, and he talked about just in general, just not eating after dinner. That's such a huge thing and people can't seem to do it.
no, they can't.
Yeah. So
But
what
it's
I
a habit now. I look at the clock. If it's after 6,
No,
forget it.
that's
I'm
what
not
I do.
eating.
Sometimes we don't eat until 7 because of my husband's work schedule, but I really made it a habit that, after dinner, we have a piece of fruit and that's it. Kitchen closed, brush the teeth.
Yeah, yes, that's a really good one. Brush the teeth. And I also do some of these the 5-2. Have a 500 calorie day. I don't do it every week. I just sometimes, especially if I know I have a trip coming up or something that's going to interfere, I'll throw in a few of these really low calorie days,
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of
So,
prime myself.
so on these low calorie days, what are you eating? Because let our listeners know that whether you're doing intermittent fasting or not, you're following the True North diet, which is a health promoting diet of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, a little bit of nuts and seeds, and no sugar, oil, salt. So you're eating the healthiest diet when you are eating.
Right.
And
Right.
you've eaten that
And
way.
on those 500 calorie days, I really concentrate on steamed vegetables, raw vegetables,
Mm,
and legumes. I
nice.
try to avoid the grains.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I may have a little bit of avocado or a few nuts, but 500 calories doesn't get you very far.
Not
So
enough.
mostly,
Yeah.
if I have made a pot of beans, I'll have a bowl of beans, and then I'll steam a bunch of vegetables, and then I'll make a nice salad.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yep.
500 calories worth of that.
What now? I imagine having access to the True North kitchen, you probably don't cook very much because you can get all your meals there if you want, right?
I can. It's just that I live a half hour away.
Oh, okay. So you do actually have to.
So,
What's your favorite food?
yeah, I do cook.
What's your favorite thing to eat?
My favorite thing to eat? Oh,
Yeah.
fresh cooked brown rice.
Yeah, I do love rice. Yeah. It's so funny because
I really like that.
it was so funny because I find that the simpler you eat, the more simple foods taste good. And I was interviewed for a podcast yesterday, and they said, "What are your three favorite dishes?" Because I'm a chef and I'm trying to like go through my cookbook and like, is it lasagna? What is it? And I'm thinking, well, my favorite foods are sweet potatoes, rice, and bananas. I mean, because they taste so good to me, and just eating them as is. So I just want people to know that there is hope wherever they are in their journey to optimum health. And I think a big step for anybody could be going to True North and learning what I learned, because I really thank you and Dr. Goldhamer for founding this place over 30 years ago. I wish I had heard about it sooner. I probably could have had more significant changes sooner, but I'm just so thankful that you're there. Now, if our listeners want to find out more about True North, where's the best place we can send them?
We have a website.
Okay. What is it?
At healthpromoting.com.
www.healthpromoting.com. So that's great. And Dr. Goldhamer has said that if they fill out the online intake form, that he's happy to give them a brief phone consultation free of charge to see if it's the right fit for them.
Yes. But he really does need them to fill out the paperwork first, because
otherwise he doesn't know who.
Very time consuming to get that information.
Right. Exactly.
In a consultation.
And if you want to hear Dr. Marano speak, when she does speak at True North is when I'm there, which is at the True North Holiday Health Cooking Extravaganza. In 2015. It's going to be from December 21st through January 2nd. It's a really fun time because we're not concentrating on the fasting. We're concentrating more on the cooking and the fun. So you get to hear Dr. Marano speak in person, and you get to spend some time with me. It's just an absolute pleasure talking to you. I just find you so inspiring and just so knowledgeable, and it's totally obvious why Dr. Goldhamer married you. You're a brainiac just like him. You really know the science, and you're just terrific. So thank you so much, and I want to thank you all for listening to Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Thank you so much, Dr. Marano.
Okay, thank you.